For roll call, all commissioners are present except Commissioner Howell. We do expect him, and Commissioner Purnell, who is absent by prearrangement. Do we have a determination of legal notice?
All items have been properly noticed.
Is there a director's report?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Nash Gonzalez, Interim Planning Building Services Director. As always, I always give you a fire recovery update. So what are the latest missions that the county has embarked on with the Department of Office of Emergency Services at State of California was the over-excavation mission to go back and regrade some of these sites. And 82 parcels, 82 sites were deemed qualifying for the program. To date, we've completed 43 with final inspections, and so we're actually trying to finish those up in the next week or so. So that's what's happening with that. As far as building permits in the fire-affected areas, the department has issued 77 permits to date. We have 24 in queue. And again, these permits have been given priority for processing. We have now begun to final permits. We have finalized 5 manufactured homes, 2 single-family residences, 2 garages, and 1 storage building in the fire area. And then just to advise the Planning Commission on upcoming projects, we're targeting September 20th to bring an ordinance amendment before the commission. This would be to address accessory use regulation, short-term vacation rentals. And I know this has been something that's been going on for a number of months now. What we ended up doing is separating that out from an item that is going to be on your agenda later this morning, which is the ADUs, because I believe it's 20.164 of the county code has all these accessory uses categorized under one. So the idea is to separate out the vacation home rentals and have it as a standalone ordinance. So that's our target, is to bring it before the Planning Commission on September 20th. And then I'm going to ask Julia to talk about the next one. We have a coastal project, fiber optic project that is being proposed, and I'll have Julia.
Thank you. So Julia Acker, Senior Planner. So there is going to be a project coming forward, and I anticipate in the next few months that it'll be submitted formally to our office, which is for a new fiber optic cable coming over from Hong Kong to land in Manchester. So we've had projects like this previously. They were, I think it was in the 90s, the last time that we did any fiber optic cables. But so that'll be coming forward in this next year to the Planning Commission for consideration.
You know, I've always wondered why Manchester. I mean, it's not even really on a road going east. You know, I mean, I don't know if you've had any insight into that.
If I may, I was actually involved with the fiber optic cable project back in the 90s that AT&T proposed, and that was a question that came up then by the Planning Commission and also came up by staff. And apparently it's the shortest distance or the straightest distance between Japan and the mainland here.
Gotcha.
And certainly now, because there is an existing AT&T facility there, it does make it easier. They have all this equipment already in place, so that bringing additional lines into that area is easier than maybe bringing it to new areas of the county.
Are they going to run it along the road as they did the last one? I mean, it was really disruptive last time.
My understanding with this project particularly is just getting the cable to the actual landing site in Manchester, and then the distribution from there will be handled under a subsequent permit.
But are they going to retrench the whole?
That I'm not certain. So, you know, right now, at least what the project appears to entail would be some trenching along Highway 1 between the landing site and the AT&T facility, but it is, at this time, they don't have a proposal for dispersing it throughout the county.
Okay.
And that would conclude the director's report. Thank you.
Okay. Now on the agenda is matters from the public. The Planning Commission welcomes participation in commission meetings. This item is limited to matters which are under the jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the posted agenda, and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action will be taken. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission? Seeing none, we will close this portion. There are no items on the consent calendar, so we will move to the regular calendar, case U 2017-0019.
Juliana Cherry, planner with Mendocino County Planning and Building Services. This is a continued item. We previously discussed the land uses and the development at the site, and the item was continued to allow time for the applicant to revise their off-street parking to conform with our zoning code, which they have done. You'll see the proposed revised design on the monitor. 4 employee parking spaces will be incorporated within the existing warehouse, reducing the square footage allocated for warehouse for storage use. So staff finds that the proposed 10 off-street parking spaces satisfies the requirements of our off-street parking, and recommends retaining the conditions of project approval regarding off-street parking. There was also discussion at the last Planning Commission brought up by the Planning Commissioners regarding food and beverage retail sales and Condition 12. Staff has clarified Condition 12 and discussed the clarification with the applicant, and they are in agreement. The revised Condition 12 would read: food and beverage retail sales. Food preparation shall be limited to processing coastal-dependent distillates and smoked fish. Food tasting may include serving complimentary food items, and retail sale of coastal-dependent food and beverage is intended for off-site consumption. And then the category A and B have no changes. Staff feels that this clarifies that the food and beverage retail sales is coastal dependent. It's ancillary to the primary use on the site, and that food tasting, there's a food tasting room in the site plan, would include complimentary food items. Staff therefore recommends that the proposed project located in our coastal program area and the Fishing Village District satisfies the requirements of our zoning code, and our recommendation is by resolution the Planning Commission grant the Coastal Development Use Permit 2017-19 for the project as proposed by the applicant, based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval as modified. Attached to the memo is the resolution, and you will see some strikeouts in the resolution as staff had included references to Chapter 20196 incorrectly. So you'll see that those references are stricken from the resolution in the section for findings. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I do have one.
Okay.
I realized I didn't quite understand if the parking here is going to be restricted to people that are using the services of the building. Is there going to be a posted sign? Is there going to be towing if it's found that people are just parking there to go wander around?
Do you want to take it, Julie?
Sure. I can say we typically would not be regulating how they would be, designating their parking area. It is intended that it would be for the uses that are present on site. The requirements for off-street parking per our code would really be that must be limited to the use here. I'm unclear, and the applicant may be able to speak to, or their agent, as to whether or not they plan to have any restrictions or towing signs or anything like that posted at the parking area. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, then we will hear from the applicant.
Good morning. Okay, good.
Say your name for the record.
Thank
please.
you, Blair Foster, agent for the applicant. Thanks. I would like to, first of all, thank staff for working with us so diligently on solving this parking matter. And I would like to bring up, I believe that there is a typo in the condition revisement. It says complimentary. I believe it should be complementary with an E rather than an I. And I would request that be rectified. And then I would like to just add some commentary in the difficulty in resolving this parking issue. Thanks. Okay, cool. When I went down to the harbor after the last meeting, I had our office manager come with me and do some aerial photos. And this is the current state of parking in the harbor. And as you can see, there's not the ability for any business down there to follow regulations per the Mendocino code. Then I had him, this was the parking plan as we have proposed and will adhere to. And as you can see around the ice house, it's still not, I mean, Amber at Department of Transportation has been wonderful working with us, but I feel as if that it would be wonderful if the planning department in Mendocino could adopt something that Fort Bragg, the city of Fort Bragg, that allows the director to have some flexibility. They have them in their municipal code citing section 17-36080 that creates a path where the director may reduce the number of parking spaces required by section 17-36080. And I would love it if and encourage the County of Mendocino to consider adopting such a provision in their regulations. Obviously, I know it's on the list to update the harbor plan, but that probably won't happen. But in the meantime, if we could adopt something, because it's virtually impossible for any business. And I would also ask that the planning department revisit and perhaps change their stance of not supporting applications for variances, specifically proposing reciprocal parking plans, because I did bring that concept to the planning department. They say traditionally we just don't support that kind of a variance. So it was frustrating. I will say on the flip side, staff worked with me diligently to help solve this matter, and I'm very appreciative of it. But it's really an issue down there, as you can see. I mean, that is the state of how people park on a regular basis, and it's crazy. And this lot to the right that is empty, that is, now being serviced by Princess Seafood, which it seems like it's an unlevel playing field that, we brought that concept to the planning department and was told, no, you can't do that. And yet it is being served by Princess Seafood. So it just seems inconsistent. The inconsistencies were difficult to square sometimes as we're trying to maneuver through this process. I certainly appreciate the idea that, when you have an applicant before you, this is the time to, use the regulations. But it would be great if it could be a more user-friendly and even playing field.
I have a question in your aerial view slide. Who owns that large empty lot?
John, who owns that?
Bob Jones.
Bob Jones.
He's the same person that owns the building with the blue roof right there.
It just it seems to me sometimes that the only solution will be to find a community parking lot
I
in that
concur.
area.
I absolutely concur. And, you know,
But
do in
I
lieu
don't
parking
know that
fees.
the county does much condemning of property. That's a little
Yeah.
kind of a
There's
heavy lift.
definitely a solution, but I think that it's going to have to be creative, and that, you know, perhaps if there would be the ability to,
well, Point Arena Harbor, for example, has just a parking lot.
right,
And all the businesses, you know, can have
Utilize
customers that park there.
yeah.
And that seems like, unless they're making more land.
Yeah. Well, difficult. I think though that, you know, if there could, some ordinance could be passed that could give the director more flexibility, that would help everybody and make it easier for, in the meantime, till the harbor plan is updated, for businesses to utilize, you know, buildings that are at this point unusable. Anyways, thank you all so much for your help.
Thank you.
Could I ask you a question, please?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Will the parking be restricted to people that are coming into your building? Will you post signs? Will you?
We have
you
not
know?
discussed that or considered that.
I mean, it's just part of the haphazardness of parking. You're going to get a lot of people that park there.
I suspect that yes, you know, we will, because otherwise, you know, everybody just sees an empty space.
Right.
And so I think that's advisable. I had not considered it, but I don't know about towing necessarily. There's not a lot of towing that goes on in Fort
Right.
Bragg regarding parking. We're happy to say, but I think that signage would be advisable.
I do too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, anyone
other
else
questions?
with questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we are ready to bring it back to our, oh, I need to do the public hearing. Right now, I will open a public hearing on this matter, and if any members of the public wish to address the commission on this topic, please step forward. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Well, I'm glad to see that the parking got resolved. The indoor parking for employees seems like a great plan. And we don't need to go to more bicycle spots taking up car spots simply because that kind of encourages an unsafe entrance and exit at that corner, in my opinion. But at any rate, this looks good.
And I think we're all glad to see the building being revamped and, yes?
I would like to, and I'm not sure how to address it, bring up the idea that the previous speaker had about staff looking at that, and I see I see you turning on your speaker. So is there a way to address it that the commission could bring it to staff to look at?
You know, certainly
flexibility of parking?
we would discuss with our director as well too, in terms of where that ranks in our sort of departmental priorities as well. But you know, certainly I think in our future is going to be a local coastal program update for the coastal zone, and that as a component of it, we would be looking at all these various chapters, including our off-street parking chapter, and considering where there may need to be revisions. At present, we do allow variances, but it does not give the director discretion to make decisions without having that variance accompany an application. So there is right now still a little bit of ability to, you know, if you are able to obtain a variance to either reduce your off-street parking requirements and or locate them off-site, that is still an option on the table, but just that the director at this time does not have that flexibility, but it's certainly something we could look at for when we would do our local coastal program update in the future.
So we could address a flexibility issue, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
Or it will be addressed?
Well, what I'm saying is that at this time, you know, we we have sort of developed our work plan for the year at this time, but I would be happy to discuss with the director about coming back to the next planning commission hearing and possibly having an update for you as to when we would anticipate being able to accomplish changes to our off-street parking chapter. And as I said, I just imagine that that would likely be folded in with a full comprehensive local coastal program update when that time would come.
I have a concern about how long that might be when we're dealing with the coastal.
Certainly. Well, I will take a note here and make sure that we come back to the next meeting with some additional information.
Thank you, Julian.
Anyone else?
Okay, are we ready for a motion? All right. By resolution, the Planning Commission grants coastal development use permit U-27.
Oh, wait.
Can I make sure that the typo is corrected? Complementary rather than complimentary?
So, Deputy County Counsel, just to confirm, so complimentary as typed means free or gratis,
Precisely.
and that's what it says right now.
It should be complimentary.
At complimentary with an I means free or gratis.
I
or,
understand.
And is that so? What's the problem?
That I want it to be complimentary, something that complements, the food being served. I don't think that the planning department is, regulating what's free and what's
Okay, so it is intended to be something that complements the food?
Precisely.
Want to speak to that?
I mean, certainly down in the harbor, it's like the fish stores and everybody else serves things that are complementary to the fish that they're selling. It doesn't have to necessarily be free.
Does staff or legal advisor have any issue with this?
Staff is, this is food and beverage retail sales. It's ancillary to the primary land use. The intent is for this not to be a restaurant where food is sold for on-site consumption. We intended for the crackers, which we had discussed at the last meeting, or the other foods to be served in complementary to the tasting of the fish or the distillates that are for off-site consumption.
What do you think?
I have to say, I think I agree with staff. I think that if you get into the realm of adding things that you're selling,
But, in all honesty, if you look at the harbor, it's like there is the garden shop that sells funerary, for sea burials. It's like, so every single item needs to be for a sea burial. That would make it impossible for businesses to exist. The fish market across the street sells wine for off-sale consumption, but that is not, coastal water dependent. There's... To look at it so narrowly, I think it prohibits and really makes it very difficult for businesses. Obviously, it's something that will complement what the fish or the distillates, but to say you can only give away free things, I think is, again, unfair if you consider, the t-shirt shop that also does, painting on boats, and the powder coating that, also powder coats pickup trucks and things like that. I think it's a much narrower vision for this business than is applied to all the other businesses in the harbor.
but you are just a tasting room, correct? You're not a restaurant.
No, we're not a restaurant. Using that pronoun loosely. He is not a restaurant, but he should be able to serve, or the business should be able to serve food that is complementary. Not, and it says right there for off-site consumption. Is intended for off-site consumption, so that aspect is already covered. But I don't think to put the onus that it has to be free, I think that's unjust.
Well, I guess I was under the...
why can't he serve, sell glassware or something like that? I think it's very narrow.
I hadn't thought of that.
As long as it complements the purpose, and these businesses have been established as being coastal water dependent, at great length, that, something that complements and, bolsters that concept, I think you'll find it through the businesses throughout the harbor.
I just had been...
John Schwabelt.
Thank you.
Well, if I want to sell smoked salmon lox on crackers as complimentary to salmon vodka tasting, I guess that's where we're going with this. No intention of doing a restaurant, but just something like that, if I don't have to give it away for free, would be awfully cool. It would open me up to do some other stuff that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a restaurant, but kind of give more room to do some more neat stuff.
And he should be able to sell the crackers, you know, for somebody buying some smoked fish for off-site consumption.
You know, that was my only thought on it, was, you know, so thank you guys.
I guess I was just under the impression from our last discussion that we were discussing things that would be available in the tasting room to complement the tasting. And it didn't occur to me that they would be for sale.
But oftentimes, you know, if you go to the tasting rooms in wineries, they have things for sale.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree with the applicant, and I'd like to see it changed, the wording changed, spelling changed.
Yeah, as a business person, I think I agree with the applicant as well. And at the risk of having the county come and look at my tasting room, I have to agree with the applicant again that we sell T-shirts. Not, you know, it's a wine tasting room, but we sell T-shirts and hats and complimentary items. So I think it should be changed. You know, it's hard enough to stay in business without being shackled.
It is, thank
Right.
you.
And I can see that glassware might be very popular and hats and things, so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
my
is
motion
that,
will include, yeah,
correction, will that be in your motion?
yes, it will be. So by resolution, the Planning Commission grants coastal development use permit U 2017-19 for the project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval as modified in the memorandum dated July 19th, 2018, and with the change to the word complementary to be spelled with an E, P-L-E-M, and to include the sale of complementary items.
A second.
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, how's everybody doing? Do we need a break or we good? Oh, one more. All right, we will move on to case CDMS 2014-0001.
Y'all just need one moment just to get my images up, if you don't mind. We're gonna go to attachments.
They've all got their leggings on. I'm so jealous. I think this is not for this case. It's for the third.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with me while I got that up and running. So this item, this is a coastal development minor subdivision and coastal development permit for Michael Butler and Agnes Lee. This the minor subdivision is to create 2 parcels of 1.84 acres and 2.67 acres from an existing 4.8 acre parcel. There is an exception requested to the required easement width for the subdivision to reduce that easement width to 25 feet, where 40 feet is required. And the coastal development permit is for the conversion of an existing storage structure to a single-family residence to be located on proposed parcel 2, which would be the new parcel. So staff has conducted a review of the project, and so I'm going to go through. It'll be a little different than some of our previous items because coastal development minor subdivisions, we go through quite a few different categories, so you'll have to bear with me as we go through the various categories and just speak how it corresponds or is needing any additional conditions to be consistent with those required sections. So first off, with our general plan and zoning consistency, the general plan and zoning designation for this site is rural residential with a 5-acre minimum. It has an alternate density of a 1-acre minimum, which means that you can reduce the size parcels to that 1-acre minimum, providing you can demonstrate adequate water and septic to support that higher density, lower minimum parcel size requirement. Residential development is principally permitted within this district, and so the proposed coastal development permit to convert the storage structure to a single-family residence will be consistent, provided that the subdivision is completed before any permits are issued for that conversion. The size of the parcels is consistent with the zoning district and the general plan designation, and there are no conditions necessary to ensure that consistency. With regards to the local coastal program consistency, we look at a variety of areas, and so I can say that with this site there is not many concerns related to hazards. It's not a bluff-top parcel, it's not located in an area of flood hazard. It is, of course, as with all of Mendocino County, in an area where there could be ground shaking as a result of an earthquake event. The San Andreas Fault is located offshore from this location. With regards to fire, the site is classified with a very high fire hazard severity rating. The project was referred to both the Fort Bragg Rural Fire Protection District as well as CAL FIRE for comment, and those comments are included as recommended conditions of approval in the resolution. With regards to visual resources, this is not a highly scenic area, so therefore there are not significant concerns with ensuring that the development matches in hue and brightness with the surrounding environment. So the applicant is consistent with this project in terms of the height limitations and such with the non-highly scenic area designation for this site. With regards to natural resources, there was a botanical survey prepared by Darcy Mahoney, and that was prepared in 2010. At that time, there were no special status plants observed on the site. However, as you can see on the site plan here, there is a water course as well as a pond and a wet area that traverses through the center of the parcel. The biologist recommended a 100-foot buffer to that identified resource, and the proposed project will maintain that 100-foot buffer. The only area where there will be some encroachment into that buffer area is that there are some non-native invasive eucalyptus trees on this site. So the applicant has requested to be able to remove those trees, and staff and biological responsible agencies are supportive of that. Our recommendation is that for any tree removal that occurs within the 100-foot buffer to the identified water course, that either no heavy equipment be utilized, or if heavy equipment is to be utilized, that there is a biologist on site during that work to ensure that there's no damage to the resource and no change in any sort of drainage, anything like that at the site. With utilities, the existing parcel, there's already a single-family residence on the parcel, and they have been there for a number of years and have already an existing well, septic system, and there is a designated replacement area for that primary residence. With the proposed conversion of the storage structure to a single-family residence on the proposed new parcel, it will be served there. There is an existing test well on that site, which will be converted to a full production well to serve that residence. There was additionally a hydrological study prepared for this project, which did determine that there is adequate water in the area to support the intended density, and that it will not affect neighboring properties' wells or cause a drawdown effect that would be impactful to those adjacent properties. There has also been a septic system designed as well as a replacement field for the proposed new parcel. That would be parcel 2, where that storage structure will be converted. With regards to access roads, the site takes access off of Boyce Lane. There is an existing access point already. There have been comments provided from the Mendocino County Department of Transportation, which are included in the recommended conditions of approval for site improvements as well as required easement widths. Here, I will note that there is that exception that is requested to reduce the required 40-foot easement width to 25 feet. And let's see, that's going to be right in this area here. So it's where the roadway that will serve proposed parcel 2 here, the easement width 40 feet just can't be accommodated due to the replacement leach field that's located here for the existing residents. The leach field is this area right here. And so the request is for a 25-foot easement width, and staff is supporting of this requested exception because there are special conditions or circumstances applicable to this property, and so complying with the 40-foot requirement would be, a challenge for this site, and this proposed exception will not be detrimental to the public welfare in any way. With regards to archaeological resources, this project was reviewed by the Archaeological Commission at their June 10th, 2015 hearing, and at that time just the standard discovery clause was recommended. This site is located west of Highway 1, so we must always consider if public access is a factor, and for this site there is no requirement for there to be a designated public access point. It is not a bluff-top parcel, and there is sufficient public access in the surrounding area. There are required findings in the coastal zone for any land division, and staff has evaluated this project for consistency with those land division findings and does find it to be consistent with those requirements. In terms of environmental protection, staff prepared an initial study and is recommending adoption of a negative declaration for this project. And with that, we have no changes to our recommended conditions of approval, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Julia, do you know if the septic design is a traditional design or if it's a above ground, or could we ask?
It's an aerobic system. There is a place where conventional...
Can you please stand?
Yeah.
Sure.
Come on up.
State your name for the record and speak into the mic.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Butler, applicant. We have a permit for an aerobic system for the new dwelling. There is a place where a conventional system would work, but it was too close to the neighbor's well, so we just went with the aerobic.
Right, well, I would think that might be one of the main differences with the comments from the past, way past, regarding this parcel not being divided because of concerns.
Yeah, it's actually possible to get a conventional system to work on the east strip of the parcel is the driest. And as you go west to the middle, that's where the water issues are, where there's too much water.
Right.
And if I may, I'll just say that previous application, I believe, was looking for a higher density than what is proposed here today as well.
And the new design of septic systems, I don't think was available then. So.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's fine. Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions?
Yes, Julie, I have a couple of questions. I believe you were just referring to the minor subdivision MS 1976-0088, where it said the Soil Conservation Service stated the land is not suitable for subdivision purposes. So is that what you're referring to? There were going to be additional?
It's exactly, yes. And since that time now, these aerobic systems are possible as well too. So times have changed such that, and we did actually refer this to the Soil Conservation Service just to ensure that those same concerns would not be expressed. And we received no comments back.
Right, thank you. And I had another question regarding the variance request. I was at the site and I was curious about the width of Boyce Lane. It certainly isn't 40 feet.
It certainly is not. No. And I do not see that we have anyone here from, oh, we do, Amber from Department of Transportation. And so it is, right now you're correct, it is a rather narrow road. There is a portion you can see on this map here, there is a portion of this property that is going to be dedicated to Boyce Lane. And so I am not sure, and perhaps Amber may be able to speak to that further if there's any plans for future improvement of Boyce Lane.
Good morning, Commission. Amber Munoz, Department of Transportation. As far as I know, there are no current plans to widen Boyce Lane. Our practice with development is to be fair, to request portions of improvements or dedications from an applicant on one side, and if in the future the other side develops, we would request more on that side, and it's kind of a equity thing.
And so once you get the extras dedicated, then you can widen the road, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Is the applicant does the applicant approve with that?
I believe so. The 10-foot dedication?
Yes.
Yes, the dedication was shown on the map here from the applicant, and they are accepting of that.
Then I see no problem with the request for the variance. Thank you.
Okay. And just for the record, we're in support of the exception request as well.
Thank you.
And may I ask, do you know where the turnouts are going to be on Boyce Lane that are going to be required?
Those are also on the map.
Are they?
There is right in here, you can see we have the existing access point that's going to be upgraded here, as well as in here, and there's a CAL FIRE hammerhead turnaround here at the back of the parcel.
I thought I read in the staff report that there was going to be a fire lane pullout.
You may have read in the applicant's statement, as originally proposed, there were 2 additional turnouts that were recommended. They were in this area here of the parcel, and then a little bit further down in this area too. And those were actually removed because they were lingering from when the original proposal was a 3-parcel subdivision, and then the applicant had reduced it to a 2-parcel subdivision, negating the need for those additional turnouts.
Okay. So our standards only require that they upgrade the access to the project. So because they eliminated the 3rd parcel, those requirements were also eliminated.
Right. Okay, but the dedication will be very important because it is a very narrow road. There used to be a commercial endeavor at the end. It was Charlie's Car Repair, and I used them a lot, and I was always so frightened to go down Boyce Lane because you can't go 2 cars at a time most places. But anyway, so that'll be good.
Did you have any other questions for me?
I did.
Okay.
I'm just curious, nosy more than anything, on page 6, it addresses the intersection of Boyce Lane and Highway 1 where the existing peak hour level of service is reported as F as in Frank. I'm going to say F as in Frank. Could you, I don't know what levels of service, how they're categorized, and I wondered what a level F meant.
I can actually speak to that.
Okay,
so that is actually from Caltrans requirements. It's not our Mendocino County Department of Transportation. And the level of service F is one of the lowest ranking levels of service, which means that they would be looking to do improvements there in the future at the intersection. It does not, Caltrans did not provide any recommendations requiring any sort of improvements as a result of this project, given the limited increase in the density on that area. But that is level of service F is one of the lowest ranks level of services. So it would certainly be an intersection looking for future improvement.
So does
it's considered, level F is considered basically a non-functioning intersection, and level of service is based on wait time at an intersection, how long a car has to wait. So turning on to Highway 1, that makes sense. But this project would need to be adding enough to make an impact on that level of service for them to have to do any improvements.
So does it begin with A being the most critical? Okay.
It does.
It doesn't go to Z.
No, it does not. It stops at F.
Thank you, Amber.
You're welcome.
Anybody else with any questions for staff? All right, we would be happy to hear from the applicant if you would care to speak.
Hello, Michael Butler again. Actually, the Boyce Lane issue is the first thing that I brought up, and that was back when Tom Peters was transportation. And our property line goes to the very south edge, so the very left edge of that site map you see. So we're actually dedicating 30 feet to the county. So that entire 30 feet is coming from our parcel. Right now, it's our property line is across on the other side of Boyce Lane. And we did have the additional turnout, which I offer to keep there even when we're 2 parcels, but because of the proximity to the pond, that that's why that extra paving was removed. So the apron, primary apron at the bottom left corner also has an additional area on it to meet the dimensions of a CAL FIRE turnout. And I just put that in. That nobody asked us to do that. And then of course transportation was happy with that when we proposed it, and the other one was taken out when we reduced it to 2 parcels.
Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Michael, in regards to the removal of the eucalyptus trees, are you going to be removing the stumps, or how much work are you going to be doing there?
I don't really care about the stumps, except that I don't want to see them. So they could be ground down if that was required, if you're concerned about proximity to the pond.
Yeah, I'm just finding the requirement to have an engineer on site to be a bit onerous. I mean, the applicant's offering to remove an invasive plant or a non-native plant, and I think the extra expense to the applicant isn't warranted. So, but if you don't need a cat to remove or a backhoe to remove the stumps, I guess it's not an issue.
Well, it's preferable to get the stumps out.
Yeah.
I think that in the dry season that should be no problem. At one point, we were prohibited from removing the trees, and I actually contacted CAL FIRE to ask them if they would want to have a voice in this, and they got back to me and said they didn't want to get into the argument.
So,
I don't know how of course they want the trees to come out.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't know what your opinion is on it.
Well, I'm a civil engineer. I'm sure that I can monitor it and make sure that they're good. And we want to keep the site. If you see the site, the way the site looks now, it's very well groomed, very nice. Mm-hmm. And that's what attracted us to it in the first place, is the fact that it's forced to remain open because of the water course. It isn't all water like you see there. The pond is there year round. The other area that's downstream of the pond is more intermittent, but you still find water in it right now. Mm-hmm. And there we go. And Julia, the other condition which I was going to bring up, I can't even find it in here, of the requirement for a pervious.
Well, let's take a look and see if we can find it.
Yeah, I was going to complain about one condition, but I don't even see it. So.
You're correct. We included it in there as the requirement, the asphalt, which would be the change that you were looking to see.
Okay, so
correct?
It's
yeah, so it is in there already. So you are covered.
All right. So I have nothing to complain about.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, I will open the public hearing on this item. If there are any members of the public who wish to address this item, now would be the time. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
I think it's great that you're taking out the eucalyptus. They do regrow when you cut them, so you probably do need to do something with the stumps, but you'll figure it out, I think. Something.
Unless you want a firewood coppice.
Yeah, just keep cutting away.
And I think that the applicant is correct in that it is a very nice site. I've driven by it again recently, yesterday again. And I didn't have to wait too long to get on Highway 1, but I did have to wait a bit. But it works. Of course, that's not a rush hour, such as rush hour is, which it does exist. But it looks like a great project. Yeah.
I have one question under the conditions under transportation, item number 26. Should that be changed to 25 feet?
Thank you for your question. This actually came up yesterday as well too, and it needs to stay remaining as the 40-foot in the condition of approval because the requested exception has not yet been granted. Once the motion is taken, when the final letter comes from our Department of Transportation giving clearance, they will note that that exception was granted, and thus there will not be the conflict with that condition.
Okay, so. Thank you, Julia.
Any other discussion? Go for it.
Okay. By resolution, the Planning Commission adopts a negative declaration and grants coastal development minor subdivision CDMS 2014-0001 Coastal Development Permit, CDP 2014-0002, and the requested exception to the Mendocino County Code Section 17-48.5A1I to reduce the required easement width from 40 to 25 feet as proposed by the applicant and based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A.
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, commissioners.
Anybody want a break since we're between cases here? Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute recess here, and we'll 8-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 10 o'clock.
Perfect.
And we will now consider case MS 2016-0004.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cesar Hernandez, planner, Mendocino County. So this minor subdivision, this is a transfer from a previous owner and applicant, originally applied for on July 2016, hence the number, MS 2016. Then this application was on hold for a long time, then it was unpaused again later. The current owners are Don Dooley and Pauline Wright Dooley. Mr. Dooley is here present today. Applicants are Zachary Kuchera and Randy Waitala, agent George Rao. So the request is for a subdivision of an approximately 12-acre parcel creating two parcels of about 6 acres in size. It is located in Redwood Valley, about 1.3 miles southwest of the town center and west of Highway 101, located at 8100 Vineyard Oaks Drive. The total acreage is about 11.85 acres, and it is rural residential for both general plan land use and zoning. It is in supervisory District 1, and the environmental determination per staff is negative declaration at this time. There was a recent application of a boundary line adjustment which transferred 1.3 acres from the project parcel to another parcel. This happened between the application for minor sub was originally applied for up to this date, and that wouldn't affect the feasibility of this project. The characteristics of this site, there is an existing driveway at the north part of the property, as you can see on the tentative map up here. There is also an existing single-family residence, a garage, and there's an existing leach field and septic tank for all located on the east side of the proposed property line. There will be also a water easement to provide to that new parcel on the west side, on the east side of the property. I'm sorry. And for the west side of the property, there is a proposed leach field area up here, buildable area over here, and there's also a big area in the flood zone, but there's still a feasibility to build over there. It is also proposed that this new parcel on the west side will have its own well, and it will have to follow the conditions per environmental health division. Let's see. The site is surrounded by residential land use and zoning. It is accessed through public roads, through US Highway 101 to West Road to Vineyard Oaks Drive, those last two county roads. It is served by Redwood Valley Copella Fire District and per Redwood Valley County Water District, which would only be able to keep serving the east side of the property. One of the parcels, the other one again will be served by a well. The project was referred out for comments on August 14 last year, and there were no comments which would impede the approval of this project. It is important to point out that there are some things in the tentative map shown that they don't clearly reflect all the conditions. For example, from DOT, it is proposed that a 30-feet driveway to be increased to 45, I believe. Some of the conditions. Let's see. From 30 feet to 40 feet. And also there's a turnaround that needs to be provided. But those were mentioned to the applicant during the subdivision committee meeting, and there were no requests for exemptions or anything like that. There were also comments provided by the public and other agencies, but nothing that would impede, again, the feasibility of this project, since it's just a division of land. After reviewing the project and the comments from the agencies and the public, there were found no problems on the key issues, such as general plan and zoning consistency, since the 40,000 square foot minimum lot area will be respected. This also follows the division of land use of land regulations, and the initial study, it was found to be some of the stuff to be a negative declaration, since there were no significant impacts on the environment. Therefore, the staff proposes that the project as proposed by the applicant to be approved, as well as the negative declaration of the project, and subject to the conditional approvals here, recommended to you. That'd be all.
Could you just point to which parcel is going to be served by the well?
Yeah, this is the line, the dividing line. So it will be this parcel. This is the proposed water easement, since the water meter is over here. So.
No, the opposite would be that.
The one served by the well.
Oh, by the well. Oh, I'm sorry. They provide by the well. This one, right? Yeah.
Okay. I just couldn't.
Yeah,
was
I
having a little
apologize. I
trouble
wish I could
figuring out.
make it bigger, maybe.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Go ahead.
Yeah, Eduardo, under the site characteristics on page 1, I guess it's the last sentence. A utility easement is located in the same area as the access driveway north of the parcel and an electricity line overhead easement. I think that word should be changed to electric.
Yes. Electric overhead.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I had a question on the referral agencies. I see that Redwood Valley, Little River Band of Pomo Indians had comments. I did not see the comments in here. They could have been. I may have overlooked them. But I wondered what the comments were if they're not in here.
Sure, yeah. It's actually to be mentioned out of the 3 or in total 4 tribes which have requested to be referred out to projects. The 3 usuals are Redwood Valley and other 2. But yeah, Redwood Valley is the one that comments almost all the time. And usually the letter says, as in this case, that there were, that none of the area included in the plan is within the immediate cultural territory of the Redwood Valley Little River Band of Pomo Indians. However, it does include tan oak and other traditional food sources that must be protected. The poisons applied can be harmful to those harvested in accordance with their cultural practices. Period. That's.
So they weren't requesting any?
No,
Okay,
just to be aware of tan oak and
Thank you.
practices. This is kind of like the usual response to projects.
And if I may just add on to that, there was an assembly bill adopted that essentially required that you do tribal notification. So we did reach out to the tribes within the county, and only 3 responded back that they wanted notification on all projects coming forward, this tribe being one of them. Often they don't provide comments, but the comment that Mr. Hernandez just read into the record is their typical comment about protecting tan oak food sources.
And I had one other question. I'm sorry. On page 8, I'm sure this is being addressed down at the bottom. It's regarding water issues. I guess it would be under the chart there where it begins Redwood Valley as a community, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last 2 sentences says the use of the private well has a preliminary approval from the county's Division of Environmental Health subject to tests and permitting. There are studies pending to further analyze the current conditions and replenish the groundwater. Has any of that been resolved yet, or is that still pending? Maybe I should be addressing that to you.
Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. I want to read that condition. This is, we're talking about right here.
So it's a paragraph immediately following the table, right?
Correct.
We're just referring to the standard test.
Yeah, the mineral. Yeah, I'm just double checking because I didn't read the line. That's okay. I just want to see what it says. Standard mineral analysis and quantity analysis are required for subdivisions. So a proof of water, a well pump test will be required, and it needs to get a result of a 1/2 gallon per minute for this proposal. to meet the standard condition for a quantity for a subdivision, as well as a general mineral analysis. If anything's higher than the standards, it needs to be recorded on the final map. So if they have high iron or manganese or something that is that shows up on the general mineral analysis, it should be recorded to the final map. Those are the two conditions environmental health is placing on this future well. So I think his intention was to say, as long as it gets enough, produces enough, which environmental health will review, as we do for all of them, then it will be allowed to be utilized for the second parcel. Does that make sense, or?
Yes, yeah, I understand. I just didn't know if there had been any, it said pending further analysis, and I didn't know if there had been any further
Not to my
analysis.
knowledge. DH has not received any mineral analysis yet, or I don't, to my knowledge, it hasn't been drilled yet. That could have happened.
There's an existing well there, but we haven't
Okay.
tested it.
They have not done the testing yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions for county staff? Then we would be happy to hear from the applicant or his agent.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm George Rowell, a civil engineer representing the applicant, and one of the owners is here, Don Dooley. So between the two of us, hopefully we can answer any questions you have. We're in agreement with the conditions of approval. I would like to point out one thing. On the tentative map, we have a typo. It should be parcel 1 and parcel 2, not parcel 3 and parcel 2. So it doesn't materially affect the conditions, but on a final map of the parcels, we'll label those parcel 1 and parcel 2. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that clarification. I thought maybe parcel 1 was the whole thing, and when it was divided, it was 2 and 3, so it was a little confusing, but I'm happy to hear that, and I'm sure staff would agree that that could be made, that change could be made.
The staff.
There shouldn't be a problem as long as the final map is going to reflect the correct parcel numbering.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Rao? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I think we should discuss the letter that came.
Yes.
The correspondence.
So I guess my question to staff is, do any of these concerns affect the subdivision?
There were multiple comments on this letter, but none of those would affect the feasibility of minor subdivision, nor the minor subdivision would approve any other type of use or anything, so wouldn't affect the minor stuff.
So the marijuana odor concerns me. Do the neighbors have any other recourse?
Essentially, odor complaints are typically handled by our air quality management district. Any person that would be experiencing something that they felt was in violation of county code could certainly file a code enforcement complaint with our division, and it would be looked into as to the validity of the complaint and any remedies that would be necessary to resolve the complaint.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Godrowski, if they're in the county's ag permitting program through the Department of Agriculture, then there's odor issues as part of that ordinance as well. I can't speak to whether this application has a permit or is in the process or has yet to apply.
There was also reflected in this comment letter a concern that they were using water out of the creek. Did county staff find any evidence of that?
Maybe Mr. Rao has something to add to that.
I'd just like to clarify that because the current water service is shown on that map, and it comes from River Valley County Water District, and that's the water that they are using. They're not using the well or the creek.
Thank you.
The letter also mentions that people are camping in trailers, plural, on the property sometimes. Is that Is
I'm
that
prepared
use?
to address that also. That apparently occurred during a birthday party on one occasion, from what the owners have told me, and it's not a common practice. Are there other issues in that letter that you'd like to discuss while I'm up
Fire,
here?
concern about maintenance of the property?
Oh, yeah.
Fire?
So the owner, Don Dooley, can confirm he actually went out and mowed near the person who wrote the letter. He mowed 80 feet on his property so that he has an 80-foot buffer of mowed weeds and grass. And he's aware of the concern, and he has an equal concern for the neighborhood. So he's trying to do his best to take care of that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask one other question? The letter, the address in the letter is Oak Pond Court, and I don't know if we have parcel map here. Perhaps you could tell me where that is in relation to the parcel?
It's of the same.
Okay.
Yeah, right there.
Is that, so if I'm not mistaken, Vineyard, what's it called, Vineyard Oaks? Yeah, Vineyard Oaks Drive is that, and then it comes down to Oak Pond Court. Is there like a small subdivision back there?
It's the Forsyth Creek subdivision.
Okay.
Is served by a different access road than
Right.
access for this parcel.
Thank you.
Ready for, to bring it back to the commission for discussion?
No, you haven't heard from the public.
Oh, that's right, forgot that. I will open the public hearing on this topic, and if there are any members of the public who would like to address us on this item, please step forward now. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. What's your pleasure?
Well, I guess regarding the correspondence, the letter, I don't see how it would affect the subdivision, but I hope the property owner is aware that being a good neighbor is important. And that's, I think, all we can do.
It did seem like some of these items were addressed, you know, the weeds being tall, the marijuana, well, I live with it every day too, so it's just part of our new culture, I guess. And he did address the people coming and going. Is that just being apparently a one-time issue? So I'm comfortable that we've addressed the issues. Ready for motion?
Yeah.
Okay, by resolution, the Planning Commission adopt a negative declaration and grant MS 2016-0004 for the project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Second.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
Yes.
Chair Holdcamp?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
You ready, Vandy?
Let me just pull up some maps, please.
I like these bigger maps they're giving us.
Yeah, but they're not big enough for me.
I know. The print could be a little bigger.
So can I make a motion that the planning department provide magnifying glasses for commissioners?
Well, this one isn't bad. The Harbor one was.
This one was tough, yeah.
Yeah, that was a killer.
there a different app that we can use? What? It's updating.
They'd love to do that.
I know. It's good.
Oh, no. It's a PowerPoint. Okay, we'll try that.
Those are my options.
Oh, I don't even get a PowerPoint option.
Okay.
Okay. You're almost finished. You can get
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Sam Vandy Vandewater, Planner 2 with Planning and Building. Today I'm presenting to you a subdivision proposed by applicant Tommy Lee of a 6.13 acre parcel into 4 parcels of 0.78, 0.79, 1.13, and 2.64 acres, and a remainder parcel of 7.9 acres. The project is located about 4 miles north of the Ukiah town center on the west side of State Street and just south of the Parducci Road intersection with North State Street, with the address of 4260 North State Street. The parcel is in the industrial general plan designation, and it has a zoning district of industrial general as well as a seismic study combining district. The parcel is located within the Millview Water District, but does not have access to the sanitation district. It has a septic system currently, which is by a condition of environmental health needs to be replaced. The parcel is also serviced by PG&E and has access off of North State Street. The parcels, for the most part, are undeveloped. Proposed parcel number 1 does have a large industrial structure with a concrete slab adjacent to it. Oh, and the project is located within the Ukiah Valley Fire Protection District. There were no major concerns by agencies. Any comments that were submitted were included in our conditions of approval, including I have the exact same letter as Eduardo for the Redwood Valley Rancheria, just stating that the tan oaks be protected, although a majority of the vegetation is around the periphery, and as you can see, other than these 2 trees, there really isn't much vegetation. With regard to the key issues, the project was found to be consistent with both the general plan and zoning district. For the general plan, the project also is consistent with policy LU 1.2B, which discusses infill incentives. And the project promotes infill by dividing the developed land from the undeveloped land and allowing additional growth and development in those other parcels. The project is also located on the Macama Fault Zone, and a geological study had been completed in 2004, which delineated this fault line right here, which conditions have been included to ensure that structures and people will be kept away from the fault line. For environmental protection, an initial study was completed and it was determined a negative declaration should be adopted. The project is also subject to the Mendocino County Division of Land Regulations, and staff found the project to be consistent with all those requirements. Lastly, the project is also located within the Ukiah Valley Area Plan, and the project and is not only consistent with the plan, but meets policy LU 1.4A, which encourages land use density and capacities to be increased along transportation corridors, which North State Street is one of those corridors. And by resolution, the staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the negative declaration and grant the minor subdivision for the project to the applicant with the conditions of approval.
So I couldn't find any parcel numbering in this. Am I just missing something?
They don't say parcel number, but as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's right in front of where the square footage is.
Oh, I see, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. All right. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I'm just curious, how far away is the boundary line to the Ukiah Sanitary District?
Let's see, we have a map for that, I believe.
It's like right there.
The last map.
That's fire.
So this purple area is the sanitation district, so it's about 2 or 3 parcels away.
Right. Thank you.
I'm going to dovetail on Molly's question, kind of. I must have overlooked it, but I know, or I thought you said that each parcel would require a septic system, or could you detail that a little bit
there's
more?
currently on parcel 1, there is an existing septic system. However, environmental health has conditioned it to that septic system needs to be replaced. And then environmental health.
Sorry. Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. The existing system stays. What we don't have is a replacement area identified for it. So we've asked them to identify their future replacement area for that parcel. They still are able to utilize their current existing working septic system. It's just older than current requirements are that you have a primary system that's in the ground and a designated replacement area somewhere else on your parcel. They don't have that designated replacement area. It's not a system they put in the ground, but we memorialize it for the future septic system. If and when they're able to connect to the sanitation district, then all of that would be unnecessary, but they're not able to connect to the sanitation district at this time. And
so after subdivision, will each parcel need to develop its own septic system plus replacement area?
Yes, and those are in the conditions. Condition number 25.
I thought I read that.
Yes. Parcels 2, 3, 4, and the remainder will need a primary and a replacement area on record for the subdivision to be finalized.
And if I may, just to clarify, it's not that the systems will actually be installed, it's just that these areas are designated.
Right.
Approved by environmental
health. They don't have to do it until
they don't have to
ready
do the physical
development.
improvements yet. Yeah.
The land division requirements are that they have a plan approved on record.
But if they cannot find the space for the replacement area, then they need a larger parcel.
Yes, everyone runs the risk of that. But yes, they would have to identify and have 4 plans for parcels 2, 3, 4, and the remainder at environmental health, plus a plan for a replacement area for parcel 1 before EH would write their letter of approval for the subdivision.
Great.
Just to add, Vandy, Planning and Building, per Mendocino County Code, industrial parcels, when being subdivided, can have no minimum parcel size if it has both sanitation and water access as well as road access. But given that there's no sanitation, there's a minimum of a 12,000 square foot minimum, and all the parcels meet that minimum.
And because it's industrially zoned, this is just a question, maybe not even involved with this case particularly, but the septic systems are for the employees and that kind of stuff, but any industrial waste
For
would
whatever
be permitted separately in some way, right?
For whatever use.
If there were any.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure about that. All right, yes.
Yes, I had one other question. Vandy, under the page 2, the agency comments, I didn't see a California Department of Fish and Wildlife listed there. Normally they are on that list. I guess
I didn't even catch that.
Have they been asked to respond?
They were not, and I know I had a reason for not referring to them, and unfortunately I can't recall the reason at the moment.
My assumption would be that there was no resources noted on the California Natural Diversity Database, and then additionally, since the site is already developed at this point and would be going to an industrial zone, I believe staff likely made the determination that it was not necessary to refer the project to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
However, on page 4 of the initial study and draft negative declaration, the applicant is still required to pay them $2,330.75.
That is correct. That is a wildlife mitigation impact fee that is required through the California Environmental Quality Act. So it more relates to the preparation of the initial study and negative declaration for this project, and less so as to potential biological resources on that site. It's, yes.
We need a system like that in this county.
We should do away with theirs.
Yes.
Or ask what we get for the money.
It goes up continuously.
Okay, onward. But we digress. Any further discussion for staff? Okay, we would be very happy to hear from the applicant, if you would care to speak.
Martin Breuer with Ruff & Associates. Thank you, staff, for working with us on this. We have no further comments and are in agreement with this, and happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for the applicant?
Could you spell your last name?
B-R-E-U-E-R.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this issue? We'll open the public hearing and hear any public comment. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Anybody have any comments or questions or? Okay.
I'll make the motion then. By resolution, the Planning Commission adopt a negative declaration and grant MS 2017-0011 for the project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Second.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners.
Thank you, Vandy.
I promise to try and speak slower. Okay. You just bear with me. Let me pull up my maps here again. Make sure we have everything right.
Use that magnifying glass.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Okay.
if you're
take it
ready.
away.
So this is a general plan amendment and rezone application for Brian Atkinson, who is the owner of the property, and the applicants are Brian Atkinson and Jim Roberts. The request is for a general plan amendment to change 8.33 acres, which is a portion of the assessor parcel numbers 046070-26-27 and -28 from rural residential with a 5-acre minimum and a floodplain combining district to rural community with a floodplain combining district. And then rezone the entire acreage, which is 12.01 acres, from rural residential 5-acre minimum with a floodplain combining district and rural community with a floodplain combining district to general commercial with a contract rezone combining district, and floodplain combining district will remain. The location of this site is about 1 mile southeast of Philo. It lies on the southwest side of Highway 128, about 1,000 feet north of the intersection with Indian Creek Road at 8800 Highway 128. You may be familiar with the site. Prior to the current owner purchasing it, it was the site of lots of garbage, trash, and refuse, and so the current owner has done an excellent job of cleaning up that site, given its proximity to the water courses near the parcel. So I will just touch through my report very briefly, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So to start off, I would like to note that I discovered a typo in my own report on page 5, and it is under the key issues in the 4th line, where it just reads the parcels and then begins the applicants right after that. And so the portion that says the parcels should be stricken. On page 5.
I'm looking on page 5.
Under key issues and the 4th line down.
Oh, 4th line. I thought you meant the 4th point.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes. And so you'll see it begins, it says the parcels and then the applicants. Yeah. So the parcels should be stricken. So the applicants have indicated that they intend to develop the property with a low-intensity resort with an approximate amount of 20 to 25 cabins, a spa, a lodge office, and potentially an event center in the future. The C2 zoning, if we allowed it to just traditionally go through our regular rezone process without the recommendation for the contract rezone combining district, staff was concerned that given the location of this site next to 2 creeks, that there was concern with some of the more intensive uses that would be permissible under the C2 district. So staff felt that the best route forward would be through a contract rezone limiting the permissible uses on the parcel, as well as applying additional restrictions to protect those resources. We have discussed this with the applicant, and they are in agreement with the recommendations that are provided for the contract rezone. So with that, the contract will really provide protection for the tributaries and also Indian Creek, which is located just on the border of the parcel. And this will be done by limiting development within the immediate 150 feet surrounding that creek area, and as well as specifying best management practices and performance standards for the construction phase of the project. Additionally, there was recommendations provided by the Spade Natural Resources Consulting, who performed a biological scoping survey report for this site in 2015. The site is located within the Anderson Valley Community Planning Area. So within our general plan, we have goals and policies that address these specific planning areas. And I can say that this project will be in conformance and actually helping to accomplish those goals and the policies within the general plan for the Anderson Valley Community Planning Area. It's consistent with those policies, and though we did note in the staff report some inconsistencies with resource management policies within the code, staff feels that overall this general plan amendment and rezone will be a positive benefit to the county, and it will further allow for economic development in this area, as well as it'll protect those resources from any sort of degradation in perpetuity because of the contract rezone that is being recommended. The uses that would be permissible would be designed in such a way that the density would be limited adjacent to the sensitive habitat area, as well as what I said previously about providing best management practices and performance standards for the construction phase of the project. So with that, staff finds that this proposed general plan amendment and rezone with the recommended contract rezone is appropriate for this site. Staff conducted an initial study, and as a result of that is recommending adoption of a mitigated negative declaration, and that is primarily because of the recommendations within the contract rezone to protect that tributary and also Indian Creek. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors for this general plan amendment and rezone, and we have no additional changes beyond the typo noted on page 5. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I have more than one, but I have more than one. But my first one has to do with environmental health. Has the water availability been already tested, or is that something that?
Marlena Julie, Environmental Health. It would also be good to talk to the applicants. I believe we've been discussing what their plans would be, but there has not been a hydrological study done or required at this point. No.
So if I may add on to that, this application at this time is really to change the general plan designation and to rezone the parcel, and then at the time of future development is when the adequacy of water and septic will be evaluated for that parcel.
So if it turns out that there's inadequate water, the project is stopped.
Or they may have to, lessen the intensity of use on the site such that it conforms to the environmental constraints.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I had a question about, there are a few uses that are allowed in the buffer zone. The spa being one and a pavilion. Would the reason they're being allowed in the buffer zone be that they don't use water or create wastewater?
There was actually, we did quite a bit of back and forth. I will say that it took about 2 or 3 years to get Fish and Wildlife to buy off on the recommendations in the contract rezone. And a portion of that was they were originally wanting no development within that area at all. And so we worked together with the applicant and with Fish and Wildlife to come to a compromise where they were willing to allow certain limited development within that area. There wasn't any factor of whether or not it was a high water use or not. It was more just looking to limit the development in that area. So the applicant did provide a site plan with some potential improvements that would be within that buffer zone such that we could restrict the density in that area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a comment, I'm glad to see California Department of Fish and Wildlife earn their $2,330.75 this time.
They certainly did.
we want to backcharge them.
Any other questions for staff?
Well, I have a concern, and I don't know if it's a question. I think it's too early in the stage, but it seems that at build-out, the traffic onto 128 might be impacted. I don't know if this is the time to look at that or not.
You will actually see in the recommendations for the contract, there is actually, and I just want to put my finger on it so I can speak coherently about it. There is a requirement in here. It is actually number 7 in the contract, which is Exhibit C. It's at the very end of your packet. And that discusses that prior to issuance of a building permit for any development, the applicants will be required to prepare a site plan with their vision of the ultimate build out for the property for the review and recommendation of the California Department of Transportation. So it will capture any requirements that may be necessary to upgrade the existing highway to meet any additional density or use on that road.
Okay. I also realize that right now there is no traffic going in and out of the closed mill, but that may not be the case forever. So Thank you.
Yeah, I had that same question. It's a place that I drive by on 128. That's the only way you can get up and down the valley, and from Philo down and there and up, people are not. They don't often understand what speed we're going and so forth, and traffic feeding onto that, it seems to me, is going to be a problem. But as you say, that's the next stage.
That will be at the development phase, and certainly, Caltrans will look at the safety of that intersection and make recommendations that may be necessary to ensure that there's proper and adequate access.
If I may, through the chair, perhaps Julie has already pointed out that this project as a rezone, as a general plan amendment, was definitely referred to Caltrans for their initial review. So part of the initial review was also to look at the proposed development plan for the area. So Caltrans is actually going to have two bites at the apple. They're going to have the bite at this one where they looked at the land use change, the intensity and the density. And as Julie just mentioned, they're going to be able to look at the actual development when it comes through, because the condition in the contract rezoning provides for that. If it was any other type of project, this would be it, because this is the discretionary entitlement. But because it is a contract rezoning, it gives Caltrans the ability to take a look at it at the building permit stage as well. So that it gives us more assurance.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Gadrowski. Not to deflate Julia, I do have one slight clarification in the resolution, just so it isn't confusing later on. The first paragraph, the first whereas clause, it refers to the rezoning to a general commercial with a contract rezoning combining district, and the text doesn't talk about the floodplain district that remains, but there's still a floodplain combining district here as well. So counting down from the first line in that first whereas clause, the 8th line that begins with a floodplain combining district. What we're talking about there is the rezone from that RC:FP to general commercial with a contract rezone combining district. Inside the parenthetical, it then says C2, CR, and it has FP. I want to just make a minor change to the text to make sure it's included in the text as well. So we're not thinking we're losing the floodplain combining district. So the end of that line after general commercial with a contract rezone and floodplain combining districts. So minor change just for clarification. I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you have any further remarks?
Unless the commission has questions.
Are there any further questions for staff? Then at this time, we would be happy to hear from the applicants. They would care to speak with us.
Hello, my name is James Roberts, and I lived in the Anderson Valley area for about 30 years, and I'm helping Brian Atkinson. I'm also a partner on this property. So I also have a property called the Madrones, which is located in Anderson Valley, which is actually just one property over from this one. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's an inn. It has accommodations. We have 3 tasting rooms on the property and a restaurant and a spa. Sure. Yep. And as for a couple things came up, one was water. The property, we have had septic analysis on the property, so Carl Rudderman's been out. We haven't found any perk problems. If anything, the soil probably perks a little bit too much, but we've already identified probably 4 or 5 sites for septic. We also have already put in 1 new septic system on the property because there are existing buildings that are already there. Water, there's a ton of water on the property. There's an existing well there that's been functioning really well. We would probably go ahead and put a new well in at some point too, but water we're pretty unconcerned about at this point. It's a rarity, but this property has a lot of water. So, and as far as the community, we've had a lot of support in what we've been doing. This property was on the market for about 20 years, kept in a trust. It had squatters on the property. Drove by it many times and always wondered what was down there and what was happening. It was originally a spiritual retreat, so the property was a campground at one point. It had a pottery shop on it at one point. Through the years, when it went into the trust, it went into neglect. There were squatters there. So we went through, and when we found the property and decided that it's a beautiful parcel, we'd like to do something with it, we started a cleanup process on it, which has taken us about 4 years. So, and I think for the wineries that are in our area, we have a real shortage for hospitality accommodations. We've been pretty successful with our inn at the Madrones. We have about 9 rooms, but they're fully booked. We have run 80% occupancy in August, which is phenomenal. I've been on a big drive to try to take the Anderson Valley area and turn it into a destination of its own. So we've had a tremendous amount of publicity over the area. We were just in Travel and Leisure. We had a 9-page feature last month. We hosted the writer that came in, and everybody seems very excited about this project. The dwellings that we're thinking about doing that are within that buffer zone are treehouse accommodations. The plans have already been executed. And I think Fish and Wildlife, when we worked with them on the project, they came out a few times and they were very excited about what we're doing and really tried to find a way to make it work. So we kind of came up with a compromise on that.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing. And if there are any members of the public who would like to address this item, this would be the time. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any questions, comments?
I have a motion if, so let's hear the comments.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Just a comment, I'm glad to see it cleaned up and all the work you've gone to. That's very admirable.
I've always wondered what was going to happen to that site.
We bought it up.
Okay.
And before we say the motion, can we just change it so that at the very beginning it reads by resolution as modified at hearing, and then read the rest as written?
As modified at hearing?
Yes.
Okay. By resolution, as modified at hearing, the Planning Commission recommends the Board of Supervisors adopt a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring program, approve a general plan land use amendment to change 8.44 acres, portions of APNs 046-070-262728 from RR5 FP rural residential 5-acre minimum with a floodplain combining district to RCFP rural community with floodplain combining district, and by ordinance. And by ordinance rezone 12.01 acres, APN numbers 4607026278 from RR5 FP rural residential 5-acre minimum with a floodplain combining district, and RCFP rural community with floodplain combining district to C2 CRFP general commercial contract rezone with floodplain combining district, subject to the conditions and requirements of the contract rezone attached to the resolution.
Good work.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yes.
Commissioner Hall.
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle.
Yes.
Commissioner Warner.
Yes.
Chair Holdcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, commissioners.
If we have a long
ready?
final one, maybe we should take a break with.
Okay.
Is this one going to take quite a while?
I would think so.
I don't know.
It should not. This next one is pretty straightforward. So, and I'll go ahead and introduce the item.
You need to
Yeah,
break.
yeah. Can we do a 5-minute?
Could we take a 5-minute break?
5 minutes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Straightforward, but it always will take 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Matt, did you see any changes you'd like to make on this one?
Nice to meet you.
a letter on this? No, I don't think so.
Oh, gosh. I am, yeah. And so you
We
got to
did.
think about it.
This was the correspondence we received. It's simply a clarification provided by the
Okay.
And it's very straightforward. It only essentially modifies language.
We're ready?
Right. Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this next item is an ordinance amendment to Chapter 20.164, the accessory use regulations pertaining to second residential units and accessory dwelling units. And so, just as a quick overview, state law changed a little over a year ago, actually more like 2 years ago, which basically was addressed at many of the urban counties and Southern California that were not actually meeting their requirements for second residential units. And so we've had discussions with the Board of Supervisors on this item, and we received direction on April 10th to move forward and to begin processing the inland code section of Division 20, Title 20, Division 1 to amend Chapter 2164 and look at accessory dwelling units. Now, just to kind of go back in time, we've been dealing with accessory dwelling units. In fact, we call them second residential units. And our code also provides for the junior accessory dwelling units, which state law has brought forth and enlightened a lot of public agencies about this. But we generally have been treating them as detached bedrooms and guest cottages. So in essence, state law, as it's been thrown out there for all cities and counties to address second residential units, or again, I use SRUs because that's what we've been using for the last 30 plus years, it's accessory dwelling units. And they've also come up with the junior accessory dwelling units, which again have been ways of finding or new methods in the eyes of many of creating affordable dwelling units. But again, one of the things that I'll keep reiterating is that we've already have been implementing state law. It's just that what we're doing here with this ordinance amendment is we will bring our ordinance in tune to the state ordinance or the state language that calls for accessory dwelling units and accessory junior dwelling units and so on. So again, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jesse, who has been working on this project for several months now, and he can go into summarize the details. But again, the idea here is we're taking our code and we're adopting the language from the state and bringing our code into conformance with state law. And I'd also want to add that as questions may come up, what about the coastal zone? This is only the inland that we're dealing with today. We will be working on the coastal zone second units or accessory dwelling units subsequent to this. What we intended to do is to use this as the framework for jumping into the coastal units. And then we've already reached out to the Coastal Commission on accessory dwelling units. I can't say that we've received a warm and fuzzy discussion on accessory dwelling units, but we're going to continue to have those discussions and move forward because we do know that these are a source of affordable dwelling units, especially in the coastal zone. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Thank you, Director. Jesse Davis, Project Planner, Mendocino County. Today I'm presenting to you Ordinance Amendment 2018-0006. On April 10th, 2018, the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors directed staff to amend County Inland Zoning Code, particularly this chapter, Chapter 20.164, Accessory Use Regulations, particularly with regard to second residential units, or as I'll refer to them moving forward as accessory dwelling units. As directed by the Board of Supervisors, this directive serves as a local complement to actions recently undertaken by the state, or as now implied about 2 years ago by the state, to address housing affordability. And these are via these specific bills, via Senate Bill 1069, Assembly Bill 2299, and Assembly Bill 2406. Presently, within unincorporated Mendocino County, accessory dwelling units are allowed throughout the Inland Zoning Division in all zoning districts that permit a single-family dwelling. Under AB 2299 and SB 1069, proposed changes to the County Inland Zoning Code, and again particularly to Chapter 20.164, include updating and aligning important terminology, clarifying parking requirements, and establishing fire and size restrictions for accessory dwelling units. Previously, Mendocino County did not specifically regulate the size of detached accessory dwelling units. Instead, homeowners designated their primary or accessory residence based upon the square footage and land capacity. Assembly Bill 2299, however, limits the total area of floor space for a detached accessory dwelling unit to 1,200 square feet and constrains attached accessory dwelling units as well. Additionally, with regard to Assembly Bill 2406, it is necessary to clarify the permitting process for junior accessory dwelling units by adding a new paragraph to Chapter 2164. Currently, junior accessory dwelling units are not described within any county regulation or policy. However, as Nash indicated, we do facilitate a similar type of accessory structure through our detached bedrooms as well as through our guest cottages. Adoption of the junior accessory dwelling unit ordinance is optional, but JADUs have been incorporated by neighboring localities, including Sonoma County, and present a useful pathway for diversifying Mendocino County's limited housing stock. Moving forward, the junior accessory dwelling unit is to be considered a part of the single-family residence and therefore would be allowed in addition to a primary single-family dwelling and just pertains basically to our current structure for accessory residential structures on site. Finally, staff is mindful of the need to remain responsive with regard to housing-related issues and recognizes that the broad approach that we present here may require refinement as accessory dwelling units become more prevalent and as residents take advantage of the opportunities presented here. For example, policies regarding the use of accessory dwelling units by short-term renters may need to be revisited, or it may be determined that select community areas or neighborhoods should be provided further input on the dimensional or neighborhood characteristics of those accessory dwelling units. For now, however, the county seeks a broad framework that allows the Board of Supervisors' direction to be followed and complies with the Senate Bill 1069, Assembly Bill 2299, and Assembly Bill 2406. Below in the staff report, I do go over a number of the changes presented and required with regards to the statutory updates required by those laws. And again, as you can see, a majority of these really aren't totally applicable to Mendocino County with many respects, given our sort of diverse property arrangement. For example, a lot of the requirements and updates are going to be have concerns with regards to parking. Obviously, in a rural county such as ours, many of those concerns are not shared by the vast majority of parcels. There was one change that I would like to bring forward, or one modification that was presented by Wind Coastal Planning, and there is a memo that was delivered in front of you as well as placed in front of, placed at the front door. And specifically, that's just clarifying the one of the aspects of junior accessory dwelling units. Per state law, owner occupation is required in that dwelling unit, and there was just some need to clarify terminology in particular. As long as the owner of that residential lot is residing within the junior accessory dwelling unit or the remainder of the single-family dwelling, we comply with state law. The wording that I initially had was somewhat confusing, and I defer to the memo's language here, which is either the single-family dwelling or the junior accessory dwelling unit must be owner-occupied. And again, the terminology I originally used was somewhat confusing. Sorry, the change in particular is to add the word either. And excuse me, the section is the accessory dwelling unit update. It's the added addition of the junior accessory dwelling unit on page 10. Y1 is the proposal. And again, it's simply to add either the single-family dwelling or the junior accessory dwelling unit must be owner-occupied. Currently it reads, the single-family dwelling must be owner-occupied. Again, it's a terminology issue as we incorporate these new definitions into our lexicon and into our vocabulary. Other than that, we recommend that the Planning Commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve this project by adopting an ordinance amending Mendocino County 20.164 accessory use regulations. And I'm happy to address any questions either from you commissioners or the public with regards to this ordinance amendment. Thank you very much.
And if I may add through the chair, just wanted to go ahead and point out that this is exempt from CEQA, as this is a statutory ordinance that actually adds further framework and regulation, so it would be exempt from any further CEQA review.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
So, Jesse, how will this relate to what's called or commonly called granny units, where there's no kitchen? Will that be able to be modified? You know, can you add a kitchen with this new regulation?
So,
et cetera.
That's a great question, and part of the reason that we're presenting this ordinance and at this time is to really align terminology across the board. You know, with regards to second residential units, granny units as they're commonly referred, we now want to begin to refer to this particular structure as an accessory dwelling unit. Our guest cottages and detached bedrooms in particular, we're leaving those definitions alone at this moment with regards to the requirements for those structures. The only additional accessory structure that we do create now is this junior accessory dwelling unit, which is basically a carve out of the existing single family home. And to do so, we did have to add specific definitions, particularly an efficiency kitchen, which is one of the definitions added in the use definitions added here. It's possible now that that's, again, part of the lexicon of Mendocino County with regards to accessory units, that we could look further at some of the guest cottages and existing detached bedrooms. As I indicated, this is really just a broad framework to comply with the statutory requirements of state law. But moving forward, I do hope that this engenders a conversation about potentially reflecting on our current situation with accessory units.
And if I may add through the chair, as Jesse said, this is the beginning. We will be re-looking at all of these things when we embark on the housing element as well, because one of the actions that one has to do, or the exercise that you have to do with the housing element update, is to always look at existing barriers. So even though we're doing something here, we may find that after trying to implement any of the ordinances, if there is a perceived barrier, then we definitely will look at it at the housing element stage as well.
Another question.
Please.
So, for the second unit, not the junior unit, for the second unit, will the owner have to live on the property?
No. Currently, we have no prohibition with regards to owner occupation of the property for accessory dwelling or second residences. Now, the only requirement now is for junior accessory dwelling units. When those are permitted, we do require that the owner resides on site. And potentially those are restrictions that we could talk about moving forward under other ordinance amendments and updates to accessory policy.
It wasn't 100% clear to me. Could there be a junior accessory dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit on the same parcel?
Yes, and I apologize for any confusion. Our residential allotment for accessory structures is somewhat confusing, but the impetus of this is basically to allow for a junior accessory dwelling unit and not consider it a form of increasing density, because simply it is carving out effectively a bedroom for that individual with the ability for them to reside independently within that single family residence. So a junior accessory dwelling unit, as indicated in these regulations as proposed, would not restrict the applicant from constructing an accessory dwelling unit and also a guest cottage if available, or detached bedroom depending on the combination. So essentially, this does not affect our current residential allotment of accessory structures.
My other question is about, I know there's a lot of interest in the Ukiah area in tiny house developments and stuff like that, and I am assuming that all these accessory uses would just be have to have normal sewerage and everything, and they don't.
And that's a really good question, and I think it's one of the existing barriers and the reasons why we haven't seen local residents take advantage of the sort of ordinance as it exists. As we convey it right now, there are very few changes other than sort of some terminology updates and clarifications around parking. Again, the vast majority of our ordinance already complies with state law. The prohibiting factors in Mendocino County in particular are, as Nash has often discussed in front of you, with regards to access to water and sewer, and then also just having the knowledge and capacity to move building permit through that standard process. So it really behooves us as the county to inform and educate citizens and residents about their options moving forward. Other counties such as San Mateo and Marin and Sonoma have taken a very exhaustive approach to that educational approach, because only when an applicant feels like they are fully capable of undertaking the construction of a second residence are they going to do it. So it's really about laying out and creating an educational platform for those residents. But you're correct, all of the standard building permit processes apply with regards to permitting that second residence. And as indicated in the staff report, There are certain areas where that's going to be prohibitive and difficult, particularly in Redwood Valley or areas where there's currently a moratorium, or the ability for the applicant to overcome those infrastructure restraints is just cost prohibitive.
And I think just to taper off on that is that your question with regards to tiny houses and so on. That's another one of those issues that will be looked at. It's being looked at by a lot of jurisdictions right now because there are certain minimum requirements, size requirements under the building code. And theoretically, at this point, the only way you can really treat tiny homes is really look at them like an RV and set them up in an RV park setting. And that's one of the issues that we're still grappling with tiny homes. And that's why I think everybody looks at tiny homes, everybody wants to do tiny homes, but once they actually start looking at, and I'm referring to the jurisdictions, once they actually start looking at the building code, the building code is the limiting factor. I do know that because tiny homes have received a lot of publicity in the news and scrutiny, that we may see some legislative changes that may be reflected in the 2019 building code update. So that's our hope, because then there'll actually be some definitions that we can actually work with. But at this point, there's a minimum room and building size for these units, and they don't meet those requirements under the building code. The only way they could do it is that if somebody came in and applied for a use permit and set up an RV park of tiny homes. That would be the way to do it at this point. But everybody is in the same situation, so I think we're all waiting for legislation, and we're waiting for changes in the building code and the Building Standards Commission to take a look at that also.
Will a parcel be limited to one accessory unit, or can you put more than one on a parcel?
Good question. Currently, our accessory residential policy allows for an individual to have their single-family residence and either a second residential unit as well as a guest cottage. So we already allow for a mixture of accessory residential structures on the site, depending on what's currently there and what the site is capable of maintaining.
Could I clarify a few things?
Of course.
One is the discretionary part of this. Does a JADU require a permit?
Other than standard building permits that would be required for the change of occupancy, there would be no planning-related permit that I would foresee for a junior accessory dwelling unit.
And for the other accessory dwelling unit?
For all of the accessory units, which is the second unit, the junior accessory dwelling units, accessories, it would just require a standard building permit. In fact, I will take you back in time, back to the 1980s. We required use permits and then administrative permits. And then as part of going through our housing element exercises, we removed barriers back in the 90s, and it was just to add just a building permit. In other words, does it meet setbacks? Does it have sewer and water? And that's it. So that's all we're trying to do now, is just align the language with the state, but all it requires now is a building permit.
And I'll follow up with that. With regards to the accessory dwelling unit regulations at the state level, it's been modified over 5 times since 1986. As a result, we've basically followed state direction with regards to the level of discretionary or ministerial review needed for these accessory dwelling structures.
So pretty much you can't deny the request of a property owner to build an ADU.
Correct.
Correct.
But what happens when, like so many of our county roads that are not maintained by the county, they're private and they're undersized, and you're going to be adding more traffic to those roads? Is there a solution to that?
If I may, through the chair, there really isn't, because I think what, and I understand it's really adding more density. This was the solution that the state came up, and it basically supersedes any of that, those requirements. In other words, we're supposed to remove barriers, and we're not supposed to create barriers. If this was pre-1986, we would say you need a use permit. As a condition of that use permit, you're going to have to contribute to the roads, or you're going to have to do an encroachment permit, or you're going to have to do this. There still may be requirements attached to the building permit, which may be an encroachment permit, but overall, there's very little that a jurisdiction can do to deny an accessory dwelling unit, because even today, a person can come in and apply for a building permit, and basically they just have to show proof of water and septic and meet setbacks and parking. And again, parking has not been an issue in the county because we're generally dealing with larger parcels. Parking has really been an issue in the urban areas. And setbacks, again, most of these lots that we're talking about have to be an acre or larger to accommodate the septic and well. So parking and setbacks has really not been an issue in the county. And I think, as Jesse has indicated, I really believe there's a lot of folks out there that just don't understand they can have a second unit. And that's why we haven't really been inundated with second units. It's really more in the cities where there's a need for the second units because of folks not having a vehicle, or folks trying to minimize the use of a vehicle and wanting to be close to services. But in short, there's nothing there that would require us to add conditions for roads.
There are exceptions at the state level for areas which are, for example, asset deprived or infrastructure deprived. I'll use an example from Southern California. Hills around Los Angeles, for example, still have some restrictions around accessory dwelling units being placed, just given sort of limitations, for example, with regards to access and things like that. Now, we really haven't identified an area within Mendocino County that faces those similar sort of geographical restrictions. That being said, it is something that we could look at in the future moving forward if we identify an area that is prohibitive or additional development would, for example, create challenges with regards to life and safety. But at this stage, we have not identified an area in Mendocino County. We can do a better job with regards to accessory dwelling units, incorporating them in future plans, for example, our housing element and other plan-making documents to help guide that development. But at this stage, again, it's simply a ministerial permit.
And then with the ADU size limit of that's so what has been a second unit in our county is now restricted in size to 1,200 square feet.
That is correct.
But I assume that the established older ones will be grandfathered that are larger.
That is correct. And again, just to clarify what Jesse said earlier, this is to bring our ordinance into conformance with state law. And our practice has been that a second unit can be bigger than the first unit. And we had no size limitations on single-family homes, including second units. Now they're called accessory dwelling units, and the state has put a cap of 1,200 square feet. Again, this was primarily targeted at urban areas and our neighbors to the south that had more urban areas to deal with. And primarily it was because of how much lot coverage was going to be affected. But again, in Mendocino County, we've not had that issue. And I would say that holds true for a lot of the Northern California counties that have accessory dwelling units or second units. But again, they're all doing the same thing we're doing, taking their ordinances and putting them into conformance. I once had a conversation at a planning directors conference where most accessory dwelling units probably don't have to be over 1,200 square feet, because again, it's most people are building smaller units, and it's really what the market dictates more than anything else. And we've said, I and several other Northern California counties have indicated that we've never had these issues because we've got the land. It's just, do you have the sewer and the water? That's really what it comes down to.
And the small units might, to some degree, mitigate the traffic problems on some of these small, narrow dirt roads and limiting the number of people that would be moving in, should a lot of neighbors decide to do this. But it also, limiting the size, takes the family out of it, doesn't it? I mean, a family of some size, 2-3 children, isn't going to want to live in 1,200 square feet. And right now, I think they are renting some second units. So, of course, they'll still be able to stay, but interesting. Thank you.
Of course.
Go ahead.
So I've generated a couple more questions. I can remember cases where we have approved a use permit with the restriction that there can be no secondary unit. So is that still in effect, or can they now have a second unit?
If I can through the chair, if it's the parcel is zoned residential, we would be limited in restricting whether a second unit can go there. And I think if it's where I think we still have the discretionary tools available to us is industrial zone properties, where we don't provide for residential uses. But if it's a residential property, or if it allows a residential use, we're not going to be able to have that luxury anymore based under state law.
And then my other question is, do you have an estimate of when the coastal element is going to come to us for ADUs?
We're going to start the ordinance amendment process, and we're going to start that within the next 30 days. And that will allow us to continue having the discussions with the Coastal Commission. So I would love to say that in 6 months you'll have a draft before you, but dealing with the Coastal Commission, that's the uncertainty. That's the $64,000 question is will we be able to come to a compromise? Because one of the things that we've talked about is being able to move forward based on a memorandum that the Coastal Commission released over a year ago, looking at accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. And the Coastal Commission at this point has said, well, we'll consider that, even though it's their own memo, but they're looking at adding more to any analysis. So, for example, many things that they want to have looked at, they want sea level rise attached to it and an analysis. And I can understand that if you're developing in areas that are subject to inundation, but we're looking at a broader picture. The other thing is that we've discussed the ability to release second units in the coastal zone in those areas where, as an example, you have a property that is zoned RR5, but it's 10 acres. And so they're looking at the densities. And so we're going to continue with that discussion. One of the big holdups is that they may want us to update the Highway 1 traffic capacity study. And if that is the case, then that's going to take several years to do that, at least 2 years. And I've already started having the discussions with MCOG on the Highway 1 traffic capacity study. So I'm sure the Coastal Commission would love to see that study updated. I'm of the position that maybe we save that for a larger, more comprehensive update of the LCP, but not for the accessory units, because housing is something that we really need to look at. So within the next year, we hope.
Sorry, that wasn't a fair question.
I just wanted to paint the big picture of what we're dealing with.
It actually brought up a question for me, though. Is there some way in this ordinance as it's proposed to make sure that these don't wind up being all Airbnb units?
Right.
Do they have to be, are there conditions about the kind of occupancy?
So at this stage, we don't address the uses of these accessory structures. However, as directed by the Board of Supervisors on April 10th, 2018, vacation home rentals and short-term rentals in particular was a topic that they wanted us to address. That ordinance amendment we hope to bring forward to you on September 20th with regards to vacation home rentals and the uses of these accessory structures. At this stage, it was cleaner for us to present this under the categorical exemption that was particularly crafted for accessory dwelling units by the state government. So, but it is, I think, a very valid question, and I think the uses of the accessory structures.
If they all become Airbnbs, it does nothing for housing.
Other counties have really looked at this in much more greater detail, including Sonoma County, and I do believe it's one that we'll have to look at as well.
And if I may, through the chair, I think what we do is we address that through the vacation home rental ordinance. and look at those prohibitions there, so that, again, as Jesse mentioned, we're trying to look at the accessory dwelling units now and provide that clarification, but we can always come back and provide those limitations in the vacation home rental. Because again, we agree, if you don't put those prohibitions or you don't put those tools in place, it's not going to set these things aside for housing.
Right.
So we can come back and circle back under the other ordinance.
It's going to be challenging for me because property owners should be able to do what they want with their own property. So if you have, say currently you're renting out a second unit as Airbnb, and we come forward with the new ordinance on vacation rentals, are you going to be grandfathered in, or are you going to lose that right?
So we would have to look at all those things, and I think one of the things that we really need to look at is the big picture, because again, it's really going to be more of a policy decision of what the board wants to do with this type of an ordinance. How do they want to address? I mean, we've brought this before to the board for discussion. We've been given direction to move forward and produce an ordinance. Ultimately, the Planning Commission will have an opportunity to weigh in on this, and again, the Planning Commission could say yes, allow Airbnb, or no, don't allow Airbnb, and then that recommendation would go up to the Board of Supervisors.
And again, that will be presented through an ordinance amendment addressing that topic in particular on September 20th is our goal right now to present that to you.
I mean, it's going to be challenging because that's one of our main industries in the county, and if you put limits on it, then you're limiting the potential for tourism.
Right. And that's, again, I think an appropriate conversation, most definitely, to when we facilitate a revision and update of vacation home rental policies and regulations.
I think that both uses can be of value to the economy of the county.
I mean, we could definitely look at things like we can definitely look at things like ratios and areas of concentration. Similar, and I'll use the example similar to liquor licenses that the state uses. Are they overly concentrated? Then you limit. So we can look at many different ways to create some flexibility with allowing both uses to continue.
Yeah, I don't really have an objection to one use or the other, but if we are trying to solve housing shortages, building Airbnb units is not going to be successful at that. And so I think we need to kind of keep to what we mean to do.
I understand that too, but and this is not the only county that's having an issue. I know San Francisco is. I know Placer County's looking at this. But where do the property owners lose their right to do what they want with their property? And I think looking at it at just a county level is too narrow. I think this really needs to be addressed at a state level, because once again, I'm seeing other counties who are having these same discussions. And I know housing is critical. I know low-income housing is very critical. But as a property owner, if I have a second home, a vacation home, and I want to rent it out, shouldn't I be able to do that as a property owner?
Well, I think those are all questions, and I think we just need to talk about, are we just building a bunch more housing, or are we actually trying to house our citizens?
I've been wondering when Matt was going to speak up.
Deputy County Council Matthew.
I mean, we could have 1 million motel units, and it doesn't really solve housing.
So, Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, I think this is something that, as Mr. Davis has said, we'll be coming back before you more specifically here. We're looking at just addressing the ADUs and JDUs, and if there's a process that we could develop and bring forward, we can have the discussion more at that time about how those are used. This ordinance isn't dealing with that.
We've digressed, haven't
yes.
we?
Gotta have something. So, what, general public?
So I guess, do I just open a public comment period and that's what we do? Okay, if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, we would be very happy to hear from you. We're all jealous of your leggings.
Oh, thank you. They're so comfortable.
Well, I just meant because you probably came from somewhere cold, right?
Oh, right. I'm conceded to short sleeves thinking it was going to be warm, so no, I'm good. Chair Holtkamp, Commissioners, it's super to see you today. And my name is Amy Wynn with Wynn Coastal Planning. Victoria, thanks for the nod. And to staff Jesse Davis and Nash Gonzalez, we're really tickled to see the inland ADUs moving forward and with a great facility. So I appreciate Jesse letting me wordsmith a little bit for that element of the ordinance that's being proposed. So as a user of the ordinances, every single comma and word is super important, as we see with our items. I absolutely appreciate the goal to remove barriers to ADUs. I think this is really super. I have not entirely sure how deed restrictions for existing approvals inland would be addressed. I would like some clarity on whether those would need to be revisited in order to, through the county planning process. If somebody has a deed restriction for a property that says, well, you cannot have any second residential units on your property, can the owner just say, well, the new ordinance wipes that out, it's no longer applicable? That would be the easiest. B, can the owner then just simply themselves in a civil matter just go and record a new document that says, there's now this new ordinance, and ADU, second residential unit on their property is fine? Or third, worst case scenario, do they actually have to come back to the Planning Commission to modify their conditions of approval to get that requirement for the deed restriction stricken from that previous approval? So that's one question that I have. I'd also like to clarify that that there is, well, you all know that there's a big demand for accessory dwelling units in the coastal zone, which of course we've not had before, and we're looking forward to being able to have some in the coastal zone. I'd like to emphasize that there's a difference between the commissioners and staff. The commissioners for the Coastal Commission have been very encouraging of accessory dwelling units. I had a long personal conversation with Commissioner Peskin, who's very identifies strongly with our northern counties, though he is our San Francisco commissioner, but he wants to see barriers removed to ADUs in the coastal zone, in all coastal zones, but especially on the North Coast, where he sees, there are issues where, for instance, in Elk, there's visitor accommodating services that are happening there, but the service staff and advanced service staff have to travel, up to an hour away just to work there. And that happens all up and down the coast. So these things do go hand in hand. I would encourage the county to be brave when thinking about the Coastal Commission, to take into heart the two memos that the commissioners have had written encouraging ADUs in the coastal zone, and we definitely need to have them. So my question about the deed restrictions, would love to know how that actually gets addressed, but please, very much looking forward to bravery moving forward with getting the coastal ADUs going. Thank you very much for your time.
Any other comments, questions from the public? If not, I will close the public hearing and we'll bring this issue back to ourselves. Go ahead.
Could we look at page 11, and it doesn't matter if it's on the strikeout or the clean one, but of the proposed ordinance. For one, there's I think a spelling change, and it's in item 6 on page 11, and it's in the third line at the end, and this phrase begins, and therefore would be allowed in addition to an primary single-family dwelling. I think it should be a instead of an. But then also, if we look up at number 2, it states that a junior accessory dwelling unit shall not be sold, and rentals for terms shorter than 30 days shall be prohibited.
That's correct.
So that answers part of that problem we were talking about.
That addresses the Airbnbs.
Through the chair, if I may, AB 2406, which governs, which is the state law that implements junior accessory dwelling units, has a particular restriction against that use, as well as with regards to short-term rentals occurring, as well as deed restrictions on junior accessory dwelling units. That's set aside and particularly aimed at that form of accessory residential structure. So it's only describing junior accessory dwelling units in which those restrictions are placed.
Right.
And that's through the state law as well.
Anyone else? Yes.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. Listening to staff's presentation, I just pulled up the various laws one more time and spoke with Nash on the side just now. The AB 2406 also has a requirement for a deed restriction that is not in our ordinance, and I think in talking with Nash, there's questions as whether it's necessary versus not. Well, you can't really sell an interior portion of a dwelling separate from the dwelling anyway, and I understand that. Looking at the language in the law, it does technically require this recordation of a deed restriction. And it shall be run with the land, be filed with the permitting agency, and be recorded, and it must prohibit the sale of the JDU separate from the single-family residence. And that this can be enforced against future purchasers, as well as a restriction on the size and attributes on the JDU that conforms with the section and our ordinance. I'd like this general direction from the commission to review this and see if we have to have a specific requirement for a deed restriction in our ordinance as well, and to be able to bring that forward to the board. If you have any concerns or questions about that, please let me know. I'm looking at this from the perspective of it's in a portion of state law saying shall, and I might just want to put more strong language requiring that in our ordinance.
And it would be sufficient in whatever resolution we pass to just have a general recommendation that they look at that issue?
Correct. Direction to staff to review the requirement of a deed restriction on JADUs and bring forward to the board. If there's any questions or comments on that, I could help you make a determination on that. Let me know.
Anybody else? Somebody want to make a motion?
I can read. The motion being adopt resolution making the Planning Commission's report and recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on a proposed amendment to the County Inland Zoning Code, Title 20, Division 1 of the Mendocino County Code, Chapters 20.008, Definitions, and 20.164, Accessory Use Regulations with regard to the second residential units, accessory dwellings units, finding that the actions are statutorily exempt pursuant to Public Resource Code, Section 21080.17, and as well as requesting staff to review the deed restrictions issue on JDUs.
Yeah, and bring forward to the board changes to the ordinance as necessary.
And that too.
So, did you, Secretary, did you catch Mr. Nelson's comments?
No, start there.
So, let's just start fresh after 21080.17 and providing direction to staff to review the requirement of a deed restriction for JDUs and bring forward to the Board of Supervisors changes as necessary.
Do we also need to address the changing of the wording?
Yes.
Yes. Remember this.
So,
Per modification.
That's the
okay,
either
so
or.
we need to change the wording in 20.164.015Y1 to read either the single-family dwelling or the JADU must be owner-occupied. The owner may reside in either the junior accessory dwelling unit or the remaining portion of the single-family dwelling. Only one JADU is permitted per residential lot.
Second.
I'll pull it off the audio.
Well, we actually have stuff we're using, so go go for it. Is there a second to that motion?
She seconded.
You didn't hear me?
Nelson motion, Ogle seconded.
Sorry.
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I'm gonna take that home. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
At this point, I believe we are ready from any other matters from staff.
We have none. Thank you.
Yes.
Julie, I just had a question. I was looking in the hallway. It appeared there was a senior planner position available.
Chief planner position
Chief
has
planner.
become available.
Oh, okay. So
Correct,
that would
yes.
be Mary Lynn?
Yes.
She's retiring? Or
That is
retired?
that is correct. Not as of this time, but this year she will be
okay.
retiring. So they are starting their recruitments.
Okay, thank you.
Any matters from commission? We have 2 sets of minutes for approval. First, we'll take the December 7th minutes.
There's a correction needed on page 2. In the paragraph of Beth Burke's comments, the third line from the bottom, the word eradication is used, and I think it should be relocation. We don't really want to eradicate the yellow-legged frog.
Thank you. I kept reading that numerous times. But then it did say remove later on, so
It
I
did,
just over.
so I'm sure that
Thank
that
you.
meant removal, or relocation. Relocation. And then just regarding these minutes, we had a request from Commissioner Purnell about the financial contributions in condition 23 of this first item, the Sire Industries, about where the funds went, what fund the money went to. And somebody was going to look that up and get back to us, and I don't think we've heard
And
yet.
she mentioned that again, actually.
Yeah.
I remember two
times.
times. So anyway, I'm hoping staff can let us know about that.
I will certainly add that to our notes for the next meeting to come back with more
Great.
information.
I'm sure if she were here, she would want to bring that up. Other than that, no problem.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we have the May 3rd minutes.
Prior to the hearing, Commissioner Ogle did email me. One correction needed to be made to the May 17th minutes. They have been revised, although
May 3rd?
May 3rd,
minutes?
yes, the May 3rd minutes. That on page 3, the first paragraph, it should read, allow staff more time to complete a thorough evaluation of the project.
Okay. Any other corrections? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All opposed, duck.
Good job, Madam Chairman.
Yes, out before noon. Way to go.